Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Risk Modeling Hub. So, if you are preparing for credit risk modeling, or banking interviews, you are in the right place. On this channel, I simplify the concepts like credit risk model development, validation, scorecards, IFRS 9, Basel, ECL, and its related PD, LGD, EAD concepts using examples and interview focused explanation. And today I am excited to start our 100 Days of ECL Mastery series, where we'll learn everything from basics to advanced concepts step by step, and will help you build strong understanding for both interviews and real industry applications. The concepts that we'll cover today form the foundation of modern credit risk management across every major financial institution globally. So, whether you are interviewing for a credit analyst role, a risk modeling position, or stepping into a leadership function in finance, understanding these metrics is non negotiable. So, let us break this down systematically. Let me start with the most important concept, expected credit loss, or ECL. So, think about this from a bank's perspective that you have just approved, let's say, a $1 million loan to a business. On your balance sheet, you are showing that the full 1 million is on an asset. But here's the uncomfortable truth. There's a chance that this borrower might default. They might not pay back the full amount, and when they default, you might not recover everything even with the collateral. So, the real question is, what should you actually expect to lose on this loan? And that's where ECL comes into the picture. ECL is a forward looking accounting estimate that measures the credit losses a bank expects to incur on its financial instruments over a specified time period. It's not about what has already happened, it's about what you reasonably expect will happen based on current information and economic forecast. This is a fundamental shift from how banks used to think about the loan losses. The old accounting model, called the incurred loss approach, only allowed banks to recognize losses after the borrower had actually defaulted. You had to wait for the objective evidence of impairment. And this means that the financial statements often didn't reflect the true risk until it was far too late. IFRS 9, which came into effect in 2018, changed all of this. The new standard requires banks to recognize losses upfront before defaults actually occur. And this is why ECL is called a forward looking model. You are making an educated forecast about future credit events based on historical data, current economic conditions, and reasonable projections of where the economy is heading. Now, here's what makes ECL calculation powerful, and this is critical to understand. ECL isn't calculated with a single number, it's built from three distinct components, and each one has a specific meaning and calculation methodology. Those three components are probability of default, loss given default, and exposure at default. The formula is very beautiful and simple. ECL is equal to PD multiplied by LGD multiplied by EAD. But I would request you that don't let that simplicity fool you. The methodology behind each component is very sophisticated, and getting them right requires serious credit risk expertise. And that's what we are going to unpack now. So let's start with the probability of default, or PD. PD is a straightforward concept, but very much nitty-gritties. It answers a single question: what's the likelihood that a borrower will fail to repay their obligation? And that too within a given time horizon. So, supposedly, you have a borrower with PD of 2%. That means, on average, out of 100 similar borrowers, about 2 are expected to default within the next 12 months. And it is expressed as percentage. Now, here's where many people get confused, and this is a distinction you absolutely need to nail in your interviews. There are two types of PD that banks use, and they are fundamentally very much different. The first is TTC PD, that is the through the cycle PD, and the next is the PIT PD, point in time PD. TTC PD, it is the average default across a full economic cycle, both expansions and recession. Think of it as a long run average. So, if a corporate borrower has a TTC PD of 1.5%, That's the expected default rate you would see if you looked at many economic cycles. The second is PIT-PD, the point in time PD, and this is where you are right now in the economic cycle. So if the economy is in recession, PIT-PD will be higher than the TTC-PD. This is because defaults naturally cluster during the downturns. And if the economy is expanding, PIT-PD will be lower. And here's the critical part. IFRS 9 requires point-in-time PDs for ECL calculation and not the TTC one. So you might be thinking why? This is because the standard is always the forward-looking, the IFRS 9 standard. And you need to reflect where we are in the economic cycle right now and where you expect it to be. So to convert from TTC to PIT, banks usually use something called as credit cycle adjustment or CCA, and the formula is displayed that PIT PD is equal to TTC PD times the CCA. So let me give you an example to understand. Suppose a corporate borrower has a TTC PD of 1.5% and the economy is entering a mild recession. The bank's credit cycle model produces a CCA of 1.4. So what will be the PIT-PD then? If you put up in the formula, it will come out to be 2.1% approx. So have you noticed something? Here the PIT-PD is approximately 40% times higher than the TTC-PD. And this is because the current economic conditions are worse than the long run average. So this is the forward-looking adjustment that banks uses because the IFRS 9 makes them very powerful, but it is bit of complex. And one more critical nuance on PD is that for loans in later stages of their life, that is when we move to calculate the lifetime losses instead of just 12-month losses, we need a PD term structure. And this is a year by year breakdown of default probabilities over the remaining life of the facility. So think of it as a PD forecast that year 1 might have 2% chance of default, year 2 might have approx 2.3% chance of default, and so on. And banks spend months calibrating these term structures because they directly feed into the lifetime ECL calculation. Now let's move to the second component, loss given default or LGD. PD tells you the probability that a default will occur, but LGD answers very different questions. If a default occurs, what percentage of your exposure will actually you lose? Think about a secured mortgage. The borrower defaults and you foreclose an house. You sell the property and recover 80% of your outstanding loan balance, and that means that your LGD is 20%. You lost 20% of that exposure. Now compare that to an unsecured credit card loan. A customer defaults on $1,000 balance, not $10,000 balance, let's say, and you try to recover through collections, but you only get back 2,500, and your loss was 7,500, which was 75% of the exposure. So in this case, your LGD is 75%, and this makes the formula that LGD is EAD minus recovery upon EAD, or in simpler terms, the LGD equals to the exposure that you cannot recover and that which is the loss divided by the total exposure. And here's where the LGD gets genuinely complex, and that is the important for your interviews. So basically IFRS requires what exactly it is called the downturn LGD and not the current market LGD. So, and why does this matter? Because defaults don't happen randomly throughout the economic cycle. Defaults cluster during the downturns, and when defaults cluster during the downturns, collateral values are simultaneously depressed. So a house worth, let's say, of 5 lakhs during the good times might only be worth around, let's say, of 3,50,000 during a property market crash. And in this scenario, if you are using current market LGD during good times, you will massively underestimate the losses that will actually materialize the downturn. So banks calculate LGD under the stress conditions, and they ask, if a borrower defaults during an economic downturn, what would be the collateral at that point of time? And this is typically done by applying a for sale discount to the current property values. So what this means, on a 5 lakh of loan, 5 lakh of house, a 25% of for sale discount. This means that collateral would be sell for 3 lakhs 75,000 during that point of time and not of 5 lakhs. So let's say you have a mortgage of 4 lakhs outstanding balance and a property valued at 5 lakhs. 4 lakhs of outstanding and 5 lakhs of property. Under normal market condition, the collateral is looking great because of 1 lakh of difference. But when you apply a 25% of force sale discount on that particular one, the property sells for 3,75,000 or approx I would say near about to 3,75,000. Your loss if the borrower default is, so 3,75,000 is something that you will sell the property on that particular amount, not of 5 lakhs. So your loss if the borrower defaults here is 25,000 because of 4 lakh of outstanding and 3 lakh of 75,000. If you subtract, you would get 25,000. And in this case, your LGD would be come out as 6.25% if you divide the loss amount divided by the exposure. And now imagine that the property value also gets declined further by 20% during the economic stress scenario. The property is now worth of 4 lakhs and applying the same 25% of for sale discount, it sells only for 3 lakh. Now your loss has increased. It has gone up to 1 lakh. And in this case, your LGD has shoot up to 25%. So have you observed something? The LGD got 4 times higher from 6.25% to 25% just from the property value change. And this is why downturn LGD is so critical. It captures the reality that collateral values evaporate during the very period when defaults are highest. And different asset classes have different typical LGD ranges. Residential mortgages with strong collateral covers typically have LGD of around 10 to 20%. Corporate real estate might be around 25 to 40%. And similarly for other things. Now let's talk about the third component, which is the exposure at default. EAD answers a very simple question: how much money does the bank have outstanding? How much money it have as an outstanding at the moment the borrower defaults. And this includes both the drawn balances and the expected undrawn drawdowns. So for a simple term loans that fully drawn, this is easy if it is fully drawn. If you have lent $10 million and the borrower has full drawn the amount, then the EAD is simply $10 million. But here what most people underestimate the EAD. Many bank facilities aren't fully drawn at the origination. A company gets an approval for $20 million, say, a revolving credit facility, but has drawn only $5 million from it. So $15 million is still available. And now if that company start defaulting, what will happen? Think about it. The borrower has a contractual right to draw that remaining $15 million. And here's the uncomfortable reality. Distressed borrowers tend to max out their credit lines right before defaulting because they are desperate for cash. So they draw down everything that they can access. And this is where banks use something called credit conversion factor or CCF. The CCF estimates what a percentage of drawn commitment a borrower is likely to draw before the defaulting. CCF. And the formula hence becomes EAD is drawn balance plus CCF into the undrawn commitment that we talked about. So let's say the drawn balance was that we discussed is 5 million, right? And the total facility limit is 20 million. So undrawn commitment is 15 millions. So by putting up in this formula, if you calculate, the CCF becomes the 60%. And then if you calculate the EAD will be coming out as $14 million. I'll leave the calculation to you. You should do that to get a better understanding. So did you notice something? The EAD is 14 million, but the current drawn balance on the bank is only 5 million. And that's a huge difference. So if you have ignored this $15 million of the undrawn and only use the current balance, you would have underestimated your true exposure. And CCF varies by facility type. Unconditionally cancelable facilities like credit cards might have just CCF of just 5 to 10%. because the bank can cancel the facility of if the borrower starts struggling. But the committed revolving credit, where the borrower has the legal right to draw, they might have a CCF of 50 to 75%. And the construction facilities with scheduled drawdowns might have a CCF of 80 to 100% also. So, this is one of the most commonly overlooked components of ECL and is very fascinating from interview perspective as well. So let's put it all together and wrap it up. Let's combine that and see how the bank actually calculates the ECL. So imagine that in the data, the borrower is a medium-sized manufacturing company. Facility has that the 20 million revolving credit and the 5 years is remaining life. Current drawn balance is 5 millions, undrawn is 15 millions. Internal credit rating given to him is BB. TTC-PD for that BB rating come out to be 1.8%. So the current economic environment, the CCA, is provided as 1.3. LGD, since it is an unsecured debt, senior debt, unsecured one, so under an assumption it is assumed to be of 45%. That is, on an average, if this borrower defaults, the bank recovers 55% and loses the 45%. And CCF is 60%. Okay. So you can calculate the PIT-PD. PIT-PD is TTC-PD multiplied by the CCA. You calculate using the formula, the EAD, it is coming out to be 14 million. And then when you already have LGD, and when you apply it into the ECL formula, you will get a $1,47,420 of ECL. So the banks need to provision or set aside approximately this much amount, right, for a single facility to cover these losses. And that's the stage 1, the 12-month calculation, that normal performing asset. But if the borrower credit risk, if it gets deteriorated significantly, we should need to move to stage 2 to calculate the lifetime ECL. And if the borrower, let's say, by chance gets defaulted, we'll move to stage 3, and that will contribute to higher ECL. So you might be wondering, why should I care about this? Why spend time mastering ECL? Because this is exactly the language that hiring managers in banking use when they are evaluating the candidates. So when you walk into an interview for a credit analyst role, so you will ask to explain these concepts, and the interviewer will be assessing that, can you explain the PD clearly? Do you understand the difference between TTC and PID, and many nitty-gritties that we have discussed. So if you can answer these questions confidently and accurately, you are demonstrating that you understand modern credit risk management at a very deeper level. And here's the reality. There's genuine scarcity of talent in credit risk. Banks are struggling to find people who can bridge the gap between the theoretical understanding of ECL and practical implementation as well. So, for a quick recap, like to understand what we have learned today, we do have understand the expected credit loss fundamentals. We understand what exactly is PD, what's the relation between TTC and PIT, and how that CCA comes into the picture. We also understand the loss given default, the exposure at default, and how everything gets tied up to get the ECL. So 3 things I want you to walk away remembering. First is the forward looking, which actually matters. Next, that these components are interconnected. And what exactly most important is that this requires a real expertise. Banks just don't throw darts at these numbers. They invest millions in modeling the data, validation, and governance. So now you might be thinking, okay, we do have some understanding already before, and we have got some nitty-gritties from this video as well. But why banks use ECL models? So that's what we'll explore the actual regulatory framework and walk you through the penalties that banks face for poor models. And I'll show you how the stress testing ties all into this. So hit the subscribe button so you don't miss it. And follow me along the challenge that I have taken to complete the meaningful content in 100 videos of ECL Mastery series. And if you found this helpful, I would request to to please like this video and let me know in the comments which component of PD, LGD or EAD you find most confusing. I read every comment and your questions shape the content. Creating the content takes a lot of hard work and effort. Your like, subscribe and comments means a lot to me. It gives me motivation to do more. So thanks for joining the Risk Modeling Hub and see you in the next one.